Hi everyone, welcome to Northern Zen Yoga, and this is the Ketogenic Yogi. Many of you may know that I have been following a ketogenic diet now for the better part of 2 years. And one of the things that periodically I kind of crave is a cookie. Now, as you know, packaged cookies that you buy from the store are loaded with sugar and all kinds of other stuff, and so therefore generally they're not on a ketogenic diet. But I have found a recipe, and I want to thank Keto Focus for this particular recipe, because not only is it ketogenic, but it's for one cookie. Some of the other recipes I found out there that, sure, you're making cookies and they're pretty tasty, but then you're making like a dozen of them. And then you have to think about, okay, who am I going to start handing these away to? Because even on a ketogenic diet, you just cannot sit down and eat a dozen cookies as much as you would want to. So I'm going to show you how to make this particular cookie, and it is a Tollhouse styled cookie with walnuts and chocolate chips. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to have different flour than the regular flour you would use in baking. That is, and you have to pardon my containers because I buy it in bulk, but this is almond flour. And almond flour is kind of a very good substitute for wheat flour in a lot of baking recipes and even in some bread recipes. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of almond flour. So I'm just going to get my measuring spoons here. Got this cool little stack of them. And this one already has a pre-measured side that says 2 tablespoons. So I'm going to scoop that up, and I'm just going to smooth that out there and drop that into the bowl. And then we're going to need 1 teaspoon of coconut flour. Now, coconut flour is a little bit different than the almond flour. It's often used to help to make a recipe bind together a little bit easier. It has this property where it absorbs moisture very, very quickly. And so that's one of the ways that we can keep this particular cookie recipe together without using an egg. So I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of coconut flour. And I'm just going to scoop that out. The cool thing about these is that they scrape off the extra. And these are from this pantry company, Perfect Pantry, I think it's called. I don't know if they still sell them. I've had them for about 100 years. So that's the flours that we're putting into the baking. The next thing we're going to need is sugar. Now, of course, in keto cooking, you don't use real sugar, cane sugar. Instead, you use a sugar substitute. One of my favorites is a monk and erythritol blend. So erythritol has this sensation in your mouth that feels a little bit on the cooling side, almost like you have a peppermint or something in it. And so when it's blended with the monk fruit, it definitely knocks that sensation back a little bit. So for this, we're going to need 2 teaspoons of sugar. Now, whenever you're adding sugar to a ketogenic recipe, you can add more or you can add less. It's up to you. When we give up sugar, our taste buds definitely change for the taste of sugar. So I find myself cutting back on the sugar quantity that I add to recipes simply because I still find them way too sweet. But when it comes to cookies, is there too sweet? So 2 teaspoons of sugar. So far all we've got is dry ingredients. And I'm just going to grab my little whisk here, and I'm going to just give them all a stir together. Just to make sure that you break up some of the coconut flour. It tends to clump into little balls. So now we need to have something to start binding it together. But before we do that, we're going to look at putting in a few walnuts. So you can measure this. It's probably about a teaspoon. I do the granny style teaspoon, just a small amount into the crook of my hand if I cup my hand up. And that's how I was taught to cook when I was growing up, because if it was dry ingredients, you just used the crook of your hand. If it was wet ingredients, you used an actual teaspoon. And now we've got the most special ingredient, and that is 100% cocoa chocolate. Now, this is what I use. Just hold it up here so you can see it. That's not too much glare on there. This is a product that is available through the Lindt chocolate company. And this is 100% cocoa, pure dark cocoa. Now, obviously it's in a bar form, so what they have used to bind it together is cocoa butter. I keep it in the fridge. It's very, very sensitive to temperature. It doesn't take much. Holding it in your hand, it'll start to melt. So keep it in the fridge until you're ready to use it in a recipe or to make your cookie. And because it's 100% cocoa, it contains very, very little carbohydrates. As a matter of fact, and I'll just read the carbohydrates to you off of the package, it contains 14 grams of carbs in the whole bar of chocolate. But it also contains 9 grams of fiber. So in the keto world, when we do our calculations, we take off the fiber from the carbohydrates. And so that would leave it with about 5 carbs for the whole bar of chocolate. So all I'm using is just a little palm teaspoonful. So I'm going to drop that in there. Maybe I'll throw a few extra in, just because. So now we're going to need to bind it together. We're going to use some butter to do that. We're going to take about a tablespoon of butter, and we're going to drop that in there. So when you first start to mush this together, it's going to look like it's not going to happen, but give it a few moments. And you're going to take the back of your fork and you're just going to start to mush the butter into the dry ingredients you have in the bowl. And this takes a few minutes. So be patient. You may have to wipe your fork off a few times to get it to plop back down, because it'll start to stick to the fork. And this might take a minute or two. So be patient. In the meantime, you could have your oven heated up, or you could have a toaster oven heated up, or I like to use the air fryer. The air fryer makes a really lovely cookie. So, excuse my fingers. I'm the one eating this cookie after, so I don't care. If you're making this for somebody else, you may want to use a knife to help to remove the butter from the fork prongs. Now, of course, if you want to make enough for you and a friend, you just double this recipe. And this is probably the most laborious part of the whole process, is just getting this all nicely incorporated. And you know when it's ready because it will start to clump into a thicker bunch, as it's starting to do on my fork right now. So once that starts to happen, then we're going to start to kind of push it into a pile on the side of the bowl and really squish it together until we start to see it actually clinging beautifully, like it's starting to do right now. And I'm sorry, this part might be taking a little bit too long. But if you're actually following along with me, then this is probably taking about the same amount of time. So now, using my hands, I'm going to switch to using my hands now. I'm going to take this ball, and you can see it's looking more like cookie dough. I'm going to scrape some of the stuff off. And I find that sometimes the reason why I have a little longer time getting everything incorporated into a ball is because of the nuts. Because of the nuts, you can't crush them down with your fork. And the chocolate also too, I suppose. But when I just do it with chocolate, it doesn't seem to take quite as long. And I'm just working this ball a little bit just to make sure that everything is really nicely squished in and together. And the chocolate is more or less buried in there. So now I've got my lovely little cookie here. You see that? Beautiful little cookie dough. So I'm going to go and I'm going to cook this now. It takes 6 minutes in the air fryer. It takes probably about the same time in your toaster oven. You're going to want to have the temperature set at 350 degrees. And then if you want to do it quick in the microwave, it's 45 seconds to a minute depending on your microwave. So I'm not that fond of microwaving. I always find they don't quite taste like they're baked, but that's up to you. So anyway, I'm going to cook this now and I'll be back in 6 minutes. Now our 6 minutes are up and you can see we've got this lovely cookie sitting in the bottom of the air fryer's pot. And so what we need to do now is we need to be very respectful for this cookie and we need to let it cool down completely. I'm going to let it cool down until it's starting to get fairly firm, and then I'm going to transfer it to rack. So there's our lovely cookie. Isn't she beautiful? Hi everyone, welcome back. And now I want to present to you my beautiful chocolate chip cookie. Here we go. Lovely, beautiful chocolate chip cookie. And you see, it's pretty solid. It's a cookie. And if I open it up, I'm just going to show you there's all the lovely, good, ooey gooey chocolate chips and nuts in there. And it is a treat, believe me. Now, if you think, wow, one cookie, I don't know, usually I can sit down and eat a dozen. One of these keto cookies, you won't want a second cookie because it is so rich. It is so satisfying that you will be ready with a cup of coffee, eat that, you will say, oh, that was it, that was great. You won't need a second. Maybe tomorrow you would, but not today. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that recipe for making a one cookie keto cookie. If you liked this video, please press subscribe and watch some of my yoga videos. You'll like them. They're easy to do and they're for everybody because everybody can do yoga. Bye for now, until next time.